Well, welcome to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. As usual, I'm your host, Greg Bell, coming to you in live and live in color from the future rain zone here in Santa Barbara. Of course, be hitting down. Hopefully, we don't get stuck up here, but it's going to be a big rainstorm, they say, coming our way, and hopefully everyone here is safe. I will be in touch with everybody. Otherwise, by mail, Facebook, social media. Let's just say it that way. Of course, we're talking this week a lot about the tournament brackets. I'm going to kind of go through some of my brackets because, you know, is this a crazy March Madness or what? You guys give me your impression of what you think this March Madness is leading up to, because I can only tell you my number one team, Michigan State, as I told you last week, out of the tournaments. Virginia, out of the tournament. Xavier, out of the tournament. I mean, this has been the craziest March Madness I've ever seen. In the years that I've been on this earth, I don't think I've ever seen more number ones upset by 16s and 12s and 8s and 5. It's just crazy. And in the women's basketball side of it, it's just like I said to you last week. It's predictable. Those who are rated well and play well continue to win on the women's side. A couple bleeps here and there. But when you look at the tournament all in all, I always wonder to myself, you know, you get these guys who a couple years ago, not Rupert Murdoch, but the other gentleman, the other billionaire that's out there, said he would pay, you know, $100 million or $1 million to the guy who got everything right. And the guy came within one click of having everything right. And I'm still saying to myself, how the hell did he do that? I mean, how do you pick 32 games correct? How do you pick 16 games correct? It's just mind-boggling to see how they go about doing this. And half of it is just a flip of a coin. Or better yet, you just give it to your kid who's about 5 years old and he goes, Daddy, I like the name of that team right there, Loyola Chicago. You know, and I mean, we got Cinderella stories that are going on in the bracket. We're going to talk about the brackets. Of course, today, there's a documentary coming out called The Dominant 20. ESPN put together the most dominant players over the last 20 years. Who do you have as your most dominant players? It's just a lot of names, a lot of different scenarios. How did they come up with it? They had global revenue of 100 million more. Some other things, you know, they didn't take into account championships versus just true dominance. And of course, when you start talking about true dominance, here's a question I have for a lot of you guys. When you talk true dominance, are you talking about a guy who's playing in a team sport? Is that one of the requirements for a true dominance? Is it somebody who just dominates his sport like no other? He changed the shape of the game. We're going to talk about a few of those kind of names, but who do you think would be your most dominant? I mean, think about it for a second. Who would you put as some of your most dominant people? You know, of course, everybody starts off with the king, LeBron James. But I ask you, is LeBron someone who is the most dominant? How would you categorize him as dominant? Because think about it. He has lost on many occasions at the championship level. And on top of it, he has gone out and won championships. But when you talk about true dominance, do we look at his individual play as being the most dominant part about him? I mean, think about it. I mean, we've seen LeBron James in a lot of great situations. But how dominant is LeBron James when you start talking about in terms of shooting, in terms of defensive play? There's just so much to the word dominance. I'm curious what many people have to think or say about who are the most dominant players in the world over the last 20 years. I mean, let's face it. When you think about the most dominant athlete on the earth, I think a lot of people are going to start off talking about Michael Jordan because he is a truly dominant person. When you start thinking about the most dominant person in their field, you got to start off thinking about Serena Williams. You got to think about Tiger Woods. These are some people that are truly, truly dominant. And I want to hear I want to hear your list of who you feel might be the top 10 most dominant people on earth right at this point in time. Because I'm just telling you, when I started going through the list that ESPN put in there, I had a lot of questions for it because there are a lot of team players in there that are great players. They are the greatest at that position. But were they the most dominant at that position? Did they change the game in any special phase or form? I mean, give me your list of your top 10 most dominant people in sports. I'm curious to hear who you might have as that dominant. Of course, a lot of other things going on. When you start talking about championships coming up, NBA championship is around the corner. And Tyronn Lue is having problems, guys. And here's one of those kind of issues that's scary to have. You know, they're talking about the guy bleeding, when he's coughing up blood, panic, headaches, things of that nature. Is being a head coach that stressful? Because I believe everything Tyronn Lue is going through right now is called stress. And it's one of those things that none of us can really put a finger on. But evidently, the stress level to coach is high. I remember the day when Pete Carroll, who's a good friend of mine, recruited me out of high school. Pete was a glamour guy, dark, beautiful black hair, got the head coaching job at the New York Jets. And I remember calling Pete saying, hey, man, if there's anything I could do to help you along the way. Of course, I was doing a lot of marketing back in that day. And then Pete, overnight, and I literally mean this, from the time he took that job in August to the end of the year in December, he went from black hair to snow white hair. And that was all stress. And when you look at these young coaches who are in the National Basketball League, National Football League, MLB, they go from being colorful hair to just basically gray hair overnight. And there has to be something to the level of stress that is going on in these pro sports. Is it anything like corporate America? No. Is it anything like some of these teachers who are in shootings every day, it seems like now? No. But man, is it a stressful job that's creating pressure on guys? All you got to do is look at what Cleveland Cavaliers, Tyronn Lue is going through right now. Stress is real. Stress is something that anyone can have in any form, fashion. And if you don't get it under control, that stress is going to take your life. I mean, it's there. Also, football right now. We got a lot of football news going on. A lot of people moving around. Trades are happening. What we thought was the end of the football season really became the beginning of the football season. What do you think about the New York Jets moving down to number 3 position right now? The Jets, of course, in dire need, not only for a running back, but for a quarterback, for a receiver. The Jets are looking to rebuild their team. And as they're rebuilding, we've got teams like Miami, teams like Oakland. They're getting rid of some of their dead weight. I mean, Miami is basically just disbanding that entire team, as it looks like. Sue, of course, is in California this week meeting with the Rams. But so many of that Miami Dolphin teams, they're gone. And you're going to be asking a lot of people what's going on in New York because they've moved down to the number 3 position. Do you think Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, maybe Baker Mayfield, is that who they're looking for? Or could they be looking at a guy like Saquon Barkley? A lot of questions are going to be going on as teams are just shuffling through rosters. I see, Michelle, how you doing there? Yep, Tremaine signed with the Jets, and that's truly unfortunate for the Rams. But in light of the 2 defensive backs we were able to pick up, it might be a good position. And I had to say this, I've seen some of my Ram people coming on board. The Rams are doing a hell of a job with off-season trades. I don't care what you think or what many of you guys saying. If they get a guy like Adonai Sue, you're going to see a defense that right now ranks amongst the best, become the best defense in the NFL right now. I think Sue matched with Donald would be an amazing opportunity, almost basically like Howie Long's son, of course, Chris Long, who's in Philadelphia. Sue could be put himself into a position where The money isn't as great, but the incentives are great. So now he goes from being an every down guy to a situational rusher. And he's such a powerful rusher with Donald being an elusive rusher. We're going to put nightmares on most defenses that the Rams play, on most offenses that the Rams play against. So a lot of news going on right now, also in the basketball world. Of course, Golden State loses to the Spurs without Kawhi Leonard. What do you think about Kawhi Leonard right now staying out of it? From what we're hearing, Pop is keeping him on the bench. Do you think if the Spur team makes a run these last 10, 12 games, should Kawhi Leonard come back and play for the Spurs? I want to talk about that. I want to hear your feelings about that. This guy is a game changer. The question was coming into this last couple of weeks, will he be a Spur next year? Did the Spurs want to keep him? What do you think about Kawhi Leonard being that guy that comes off the bench and makes it happen for the Spurs? Because let's face it, he's not in playoff condition right now. He's not in basketball condition, period. He's been out for pretty much the entire year. Do you see Kawhi Leonard being a game changer for the Spurs as we come down this stretch for the NBA playoffs? I mean, let's think about this. The Spurs just beat the Warriors. The Warriors are starting to stumble, and they're having injury nightmares right now. Curry's down. Durant's down. Draymond went out with a little bit of a dinger there last night, but they are going through a stretch right now where guys are getting nicked, bumped, and bruised. Are they going to have the firepower to get down the line? Those questions and so much more we're going to talk about right here on the powerofvoices.com. Of course, you're listening to the Legends Community Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell. I want to talk about college basketball. We'll talk about it a little later in the show. But, of course, you got Memphis hiring Penny Hardaway, 14-year veteran of the NBA, former high school All-American, All-Star for, of course, the Memphis Tigers. And now all of a sudden, you got Tubby Smith being fired. We'll talk about that, what your feelings are on Tubby being released. But we're going to talk about so much here on the Power of Voices, the Legends Community Show. But before we kind of run through anything, I want to give a shout out again to the Black Panther. I mean, this movie is continuing to grow, over $1 billion worldwide. But I'm going to tell you, you got to love this story that came out just today, I believe it is, where they had vandalism in Korea. South Korea put up a display of the Black Panther, the whole 9 yards, and they vandalized it. I mean, it's tumbled over. What do you think about the movie Black Panther? If you've seen it, you've got to be excited about the movie. Probably the best Marvel comic movie production that has come out in since probably the Avengers originally started. I think that first Iron Man was probably one of the best movies I had ever seen. But this Black Panther movie is changing the minds of so many. Got to show just a big shout out to the Black Panther, a movie that's going to set records by the end. Might be the greatest Marvel's comic movie to date. We'll know as we get started. But guys, you're listening to the Legends Community Show right here on the Power of Voices. And let's go and talk about the brackets. What did you have right now for brackets? And I'll tell you what, guys, when I pull up my brackets, I almost want to cover my head. I'm just telling you, I almost want to just give up and say I don't want to talk about it because my brackets are pretty bad right now. You know, I had Michigan State to win it all, and it's sad. My guys, Michigan State, did nothing. I mean, I don't even know where I want to start in talking about the brackets right now, but I'm going to pull up my brackets. And when you hear some of the games, you'll understand what I'm going through right now. Because let's face it, Virginia came in ranked the number 1 team in the country. And UMBA, University of Maryland, Baltimore, beat them 74-54. And you have to sit there and you have to look at the coaches say, what the hell are you doing the night before or did you just not have control of your players? Because this was an embarrassment to basketball. UVA came into this series the best team in the country, not just the number one seed in the South. They came in the number one team in the country and not only laid an egg, but basically farted embarrassment. I mean, this was terrible. I mean, if you want a bracket buster or killer, it's UVA. I don't care about me picking Michigan State. I just picked them because I think in the end you get the coaching takes over, and I love the way Tom Izzo coaches as a coach. I won't get started talking about him as a individual in the Michigan State fiasco that's there. But when you look at UVA losing to UMBB, I mean, it destroyed every bracket across the country. I don't think anybody in the United States had UMBC winning this game. And that pretty much gives you an idea of what the bracket looks like going forward. Number 9, Kansas State beat the number 8 Creighton. Going into that, I think I picked Kansas State. So I'm sitting pretty right there with the Kansas State. And then, of course, Davidson has no luck against Kansas. They put up a fight, but not a good enough fight. And here we go to Buffalo. I think the South bracket as a whole was probably the most embarrassing bracket of all the brackets this year. It was so highly regarded as probably the toughest. You got Loyola of Chicago, which I picked to beat Miami, but nowhere did I have the 2 top teams. I had Arizona and UVA playing for the South Championship, and nowhere did I have either one of those teams losing by 20 points, and both of them actually lost by 20 points. So it's one of those embarrassing brackets that you sit here and you say to yourself, what was going on? Where were their minds at going into this game? I mean, Arizona's got the most dominant player in Anton. I mean, here's a 7-footer that can run the court, play the court better than any 7-footer we've ever seen, probably next to a guy named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But this kid lays an egg. They double team him. They lower on him. They keep the ball from getting in his hands. They shut him down. And no one else in Arizona could pick up the show. So Arizona falls to University of Buffalo. Amherst Buffalo gets an 89-68 win over Arizona. They too, you got to look at their coach. And here we're talking about a coach who's already on the hot seat. Sean Miller is on the hot seat with the FBI investigation, with the money launderer, everything you want to talk about. And then to come in and coach a game like this, I know you as an athletic director, you got to say pathetic. That was a pathetic show of teamwork. Then you got Tennessee destroying Wright State. And, of course, Nevada gets the big win over Texas. But everybody had Nevada picked over Texas. Texas didn't have the type of team that could put a team like Nevada down. And, of course, Georgia State loses to Cincinnati. Most of these brackets I had pretty good. But this bracket here destroyed my bracket. I went over to the east side. Of course, Villanova beat Radford. Alabama lost. No, they beat Georgia Tech, which I predicted that upset. I had West Virginia beating Murray State. Of course, I had Marshall losing to Wichita State. And, of course, that's what they did. They actually got a win over them. Excuse me. I'm looking at that bad. But Marshall actually beat Wichita State, which, like I said, that was the upset that I picked on the East bracket. I had Florida beating St. Bonaventure, which they did. Texas Tech putting it on Stephen F. Austin. They got the win. But Butler came through for me like no other one. I picked them as an upset over Arkansas. And, of course, Purdue won. I did excellent on my East bracket. How my South ruined me, I don't even want to get to thinking about that. And then, of course, on my Midwest bracket, Kansas poured it on Penn. Seton Hall beat North Carolina. Clemson beats New Mexico State. Auburn wins. I went across the board. I did well all the way across the board. I did get an upset, of course. I had TCU beating Syracuse, who really shouldn't have even been in the tournament. And now look at Syracuse. Michigan State beat Bucknell. Oklahoma, of course, played the overtime, and they lost to URI, University of Rhode Island. But what do you think? We'll talk about Trae Young later, I should say. Of course, he decided to forego his next 3 years and go ahead and try and make the money next year. We'll talk about Trae Young going into the NBA. Iona loses to Duke as expected. But then you go over to the other side. All the games that I picked on the other side continued to move on. But man, oh man, when they went to get to from the 32 to the 16, all hell fell loose. Syracuse upsets Michigan State. And as I told you guys, I had Michigan State to win it all. Duke moves on, beating Rhode Island. We also had Clemson, who I picked to beat Auburn. They move on. And, of course, Kansas beat Seton Hall. But what happened over on the West in that Sweet 16 round to get there? Xavier loses to Florida State. A 1 versus a 9. And I'm honest with you guys, Florida State is a 9. I had them losing to Missouri, so I didn't even have them advancing. Now Florida State is going to be playing Gonzaga in the Sweet 16 because Gonzaga beat Ohio State. How many upsets were in your bracket? When I look at my bracket, it shows me all the reds. I've got about 1, 2, 3, about 9 upsets, and it's really upsets because, you know, 2 of my best lost early. Then, of course, Alabama snuck up on Georgia Tech. I'm on Virginia Tech. And then what do you got to say about Michigan State losing to Syracuse? Once Michigan State lost, Ohio State lost, Xavier lost, and my final one was UNC losing. The brackets went from being 6 to 13 in one fell swoop. So now you got the Sweet 16, and you know, let's take a quick peek at the Sweet 16 and talk about who you have moving forward. If Duke doesn't beat Syracuse, Syracuse will go all the way because they're showing their true colors at this point, and Boeheim is showing what true coaching looks like. He's taking a team that really shouldn't have been in the playoffs whatsoever in this. They should have been in the NIT with Notre Dame. But Syracuse gets that one in. They're now playing in the Sweet 16. If Syracuse wins, they will meet the winner of Kansas State and Clemson, which will probably be Kansas, and I'm going to pick Syracuse to move on from that position. Florida State, Gonzaga. Everybody's going to go with the Zags. I don't know. This Florida State team seems to be playing with a lot of enthusiasm, and they have a chance of beating a very good Gonzaga team, which will then see what I picked to be Michigan. I had Michigan, remember, Michigan and Michigan State were my final 2s. So I still got a chance to win it all in Michigan, but Michigan's got to get by Texas A&M, who's playing strong. That win they got over UNC could be a momentum builder for them. But let's see as they continue on. Over on the other side, Villanova and West Virginia. I see them moving on from the Sweet 16 with Villanova getting the win, and, of course, Purdue getting the win over Texas Tech, 2 versus 3. That's going to be a hard-fought game, but I think the power of the Big Ten is showing themselves right now with Michigan and Purdue, and I'm going to pick Purdue to go on from there. Of course, the Cinderella stories here are Loyola Chicago and Nevada. You can flip a coin on this one here, but I'm going to go with Loyola Chicago. They've got something special. Nothing against Nevada, but they play a hell of a good basketball in Chicago. And most of this team is local kids made up of the Chicago area, and I see them being able to play great basketball to move on to the Final 8. And here I'm going to pick Kentucky. And right now, if you look at the brackets the way they're sitting, if Kentucky moves on, if Purdue moves on, and I think I've got Florida State, Kansas, and Duke, and Michigan moving on, it's going to be an exciting Final 8. And it's going to lead to a pretty really nice Final 4 as well. Right now, as it sits in my mind, I see Duke playing in the Final 4. I see Michigan playing in the Final 4. I see Kentucky playing in the Final 4. And, I just like the Villanova team. They always come prepared, well coached, as well as well dressed. Got to give the coach that. And you see them moving on into the finals. But, man, this has been a crazy, crazy Final 4. And, this March Madness has been probably one of the craziest ones I've ever seen, as I said. And it's not going to stop there. I mean, I'll be honest. We're talking just the men's side right now, but we're going to pull up the women's side of the Final Four and who will be making it there. And there's where it's kind of subdued. It's kind of relaxed, you know. You're listening to the Legends Community Show right here on the Power of Voices. I'm your host, Greg Bell. Just got through wrapping up talking about the men's side of the bracket, but we got to look at the women's bracket as we sit here and talk about where they're going. And I'll tell you what, my women's bracket will speak for itself. Everyone that I had coming out is coming out. Not a lot of upsets. Of course, Buffalo beat USF, which wasn't a big upset, but it was a big win for the University of Buffalo. I mean, if you think about Buffalo right now, they are pulling a lot of upsets because their men's basketball team pulled probably the biggest upset that they've ever had in school history. It didn't take them to the next level, but the nice thing about it, it gives the university something to build upon, and I think they'll build upon it. Of course, UConn will be advancing. If you look at the women's league as it sits right now, you got number one seed overall, but number one, of course, out of the East bracket, UConn. Duke is there. I think Florida State will kind of upset Buffalo's hopes as they move forward, and South Carolina will definitely move forward over Virginia. I see UConn and South Carolina. Mind you, this was last year's Final Two. They'll be meeting in the Final Four round to go to Columbus, Ohio. How great is that? The national championships will be answered in the Schottenstein Arena back in Columbus, Ohio. Over on the Midwest side, you got you got Mississippi State, which I think will probably advance, going up probably against UCLA. Texas girls are there. Arizona State girls are there. But I see UCLA, Mississippi State playing for an opportunity to go to Columbus out of that Midwest division. Down in the South Division, you've got Louisville still playing good basketball. You got Stanford. You got Oregon State. And you also have that Baylor team. I see out of that round Stanford going up against Baylor. Those are two reliable. And I'm just telling you, Oregon State, Baylor comes out, Stanford comes out. That's almost a championship back 6 years ago when Stanford had a massive, great, very good team. And of course, Baylor had the two-time player of the year. Then on the the West Division out of Spokane, Washington, it's going to end up being Notre Dame versus Oregon. Believe it or not, I don't see Ohio State beating Oregon in their Final Eight, but I do see Notre Dame beating Texas A&M. So out of the West, I see Notre Dame coming. Out of the South, I'm going to put my money, believe it or not, I'm going to put it on Baylor. I'm going to go for the long shot here. I'm going to go with the Bruins of UCLA over Mississippi State. And I don't think it's any question right now, coming out of the East, you're going to have UConn. It's hard to beat a team that's been unbeatable for, 4 straight years. Yes, they lost in the championship last year, but, I think they finished the season 30-1. And now, again, of course, 28-0 going into this game. This UConn team is just what it is. It's UConn. You can date them back over the last decade, maybe decade and a half, and they have unbeatable players, well coached. Gino Ariello does a hell of a job coaching this team. I was listening to ESPN earlier today, and they were talking to Coach K. And Coach K said, when you really look at it, Pat Summitt could have been the greatest coach of all time. She could have set records that John Wooden could never have touched, except for the illness that came upon her. But those are high remarks coming from a Hall of Fame coach himself. Pat Summitt, of course, being entered into the Hall of Fame for coaching. But what a comment to say to who truly was one of the greatest coaches in collegiate basketball history, Pat Summitt. But that's what I see right now as you look at the Final Four. In the women's, I see Notre Dame, UConn, Baylor, and of course UCLA. And we're going to pull for the Bruins of UCLA, of course, to beat UConn. And of course, I'm going to be pulling for Notre Dame to beat Baylor. And what a great matchup would that be? My buddy Alvin Miller would be loving that one, since his daughter, of course, is playing at UCLA, outstanding freshman All-American that came out of the St. Louis area. You're listening to The Power of Voices.com, and I'm your host, Greg Bell, of the Legends Community Show right here. Of course, the big topic that I started the show on was talking about dominance. ESPN, of course, is coming out with a new documentary called The Dominant 20. And let's kind of run down and look at who, of course, ESPN considers their top 20 dominant. And I think I'm going to just take it straight from one. Number one, they've got Tiger Woods. And if you really look at it in its truest form, I really want y'all to think about that. Tiger Woods is sitting at number one. And that's not a bad pick if you just look at it from a sports view. But I'm going to question you on that in about 5-10 minutes, because my number one isn't Tiger. Excuse me. And I want y'all guys to come up with what you think your top 10 would be. But number one on the Dominance 20 for ESPN, they have Tiger Woods. Number two, LeBron the King James. Number three, Peyton Manning. I mean, think about that now. I mean, 1, 2, 3, all men. Peyton Manning, number three. Number four, Jimmy Johnson. Very questionable call on with that pick there, but it's a good pick. Number five, Roger Federer. Very strong nominee for the number 5 position. Anna Sorenskin. Number 6, the most dominant female golfer for the past 2 decades. She lists at number 6. Michael Schumacher, the Formula One racer, number 7. Floyd Mayweather, Money Mayweather, number 8. Number 9, Marta. Now, some of you guys have no clue who she is, but this Brazilian soccer queen is probably the most famous player since Pelé to come out of Brazil. Marta is rated number 9 as the most dominant, and she is the most dominant female soccer player in the world. Number 10, Usain Bolt. And you know what? When I looked at that, that's a good point. That's a good place to put Usain Bolt, because as dominant as he is, he didn't end it with the same dominance. That last race, sometimes you got to know when to quit. Sometimes you got to know when to let it in. And to pull a hamstring, I know he didn't lose. It was a default. He loses because he didn't finish the race. But that wasn't the way we wanted to see Usain Bolt go out. Number 11, Lionel Messi. Very strong position for Messi. One of the greatest scorers in MLS history worldwide. Truly $100 million man. That one's definitely, and his revenue that he generates is definitely in the over $100 million rank. Number 12, Serena Williams. I want y'all to think about that. Serena, number 12? And they actually had women above her, 2 of them to name. Lauren Jackson. Many guys don't know who Lauren Jackson is. WNBA player, big European player, over 1,000 career points. She became the youngest WNBA player to ever reach the 2,000, the 1,000, the 3,000, the 5,000. She has been probably one of the prolific all-time scorers in the WNBA. Lauren Jackson, did she dominate though? That's my question. It's not about points. It's about domination. And I'm not sure I'm going to put Lauren Jackson that high. Ronaldo, 14. The 15th spot goes to Djokovic. 16 goes to Allyson Felix. And I'm going to be honest. I only have Alex Felix in my top 10 or my top 20. And I'll tell you why a little later. But nothing against Alex Felix. I love ESPN for the gesture. But did she dominate? That's the question. Did she dominate? And I don't think, when I think about 100 meters, her 400 meters, or 200 meters, she set records only in the high school level. She never broke a world record. She has no records to go with her dominance. That has to play some part in it. And of course, when you talk about women in track, the only dominant runner we've ever seen, of course, is FloJo. Barry Bonds, very questionable there. Very questionable. Mike Trout, number 18. Barry, 17. Number 19, Manny Pacquiao. And of course, number 20, and for everybody's shock, they got Tom Brady. Let's talk about that. Tom Brady, number 20, Peyton Manning, number 3. What would y'all call the GOAT as he's called today? And did he have a dominance? When I think of Peyton Manning, I think of a very excellent quarterback. It took him going and being paired with a very good defense for him to win his first, to show dominance. Because that last year in the league, he showed how dominant of a player he was. But his years at Indianapolis was not shown to be as dominant as Tom Brady's. I mean, I don't know, guys. That's why I asked a lot of people, and I want y'all to think about it. When you see this show, when you start thinking about dominant players, how would you categorize a dominant player? I mean, I step back and I put this to some thought and I put some reason to it, and I'm going to give you my top 10. And I'm going to tell you why I have them at that position. And I'm going to try and keep relevance of what they want. They wanted global revenues of $100 million or more, a guy that was a game changer, or a person that was a game changer. Ladies, I'm sorry about that. I don't want to be male chauvinistic. But when you start thinking of dominance, pure dominance, dominance has a word that it exudes power over others. I'm more dominant, meaning they change the game. They change the perception of the game. They win time in, time out. And when you start thinking of that type of dominance, the first thing I think of is Serena Williams. I put her number 1 on my list, and there's a lot of reasons why, but none more than her physical dominance over the sport. She hits the ball at greater speed levels, more accuracy. She is as dominant a player of any sport that you'll ever find to this day. I mean, I can't think of someone more dominant physically in her sport. Win-wise, it's not even comparable. The number of wins that she goes in a year, she will win somewhere close to 10 of the 14 or 15 tournaments she plays in. She wins 2/3 of the time. And in terms of revenue, it's off the chart. So when you start thinking of true dominance, I don't think you're going to put a man at that position. And when you really start thinking of total dominance, you're talking about somebody that doesn't lose very often. So when you look at that, my number 2 person, who many of you won't compare this, but number 2 on my list, when I think of dominance in a sport, number 2 is Michael Phelps. He does not lose. Put your money on Phelps. That's dominance. He not only controlled it for 1 year, for 4 years, for 8 years. Think about it. He was in 5 Olympic Games. That's over a 20-year span. Even when he was a kid, he was dominant. He was winning. That is true dominance. I don't know about how much the money he brought in. I know it's over $100 million for the United States. And his appeal was so great, it was ridiculous. But think about dominance. You got to put Serena at the top. You got to put Michael Phelps number 2. Number 3, you have to then start looking at the ones who play often, who have dominated their sports like none other. And of course, then you'll look at Eldridge, Tiger Woods, number 3 on my list. Following Tiger Woods, I put Roger Federer. Number 5, I came back with Michael Schumacher. Number 6, Floyd Mayweather. Number 7, Usain Bolt. Number 8, Lionel Messi. And my number 10 is going to shock you. And he's not even on ESPN. But over the past decade, the most dominant Formula One racer has been Lewis Hamilton. How do you leave a guy who wins every race he goes to? If it doesn't end in a wreck, he wins in the checkered flag. Lewis Hamilton over the last 10 years is what Michael Schumacher was 13, 14, 15 years ago. Michael Schumacher, he is the replacement for Michael Schumacher. Both of them have dominated the Formula One like no other racer has. And I'm being honest, Jimmie Johnson's a good pick if you want to talk about NASCAR, but he didn't dominate. Jeff Gordon was there. Harvick was there. Dale Jr. was there. I mean, there were a lot of guys that were there winning races. And yeah, he won a couple cups, but he did not win it time in, time out the way a Usain Bolt, the way Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher does. That is my top 10. And what probably is going to upset a lot of people is the fact that I put a woman at that top. And she's an athlete, a pure athlete. And what she's done for women's tennis is, without a doubt, more dominant than any male on earth has done for their sport. Now, mind you, don't get me wrong. Tiger has changed the game like no one else has. He's brought the fans into the game to say that this is America's game. I think that's something that he's done for not only the African-American community, but for the Americans in general. I mean, how many times were we tired of seeing the Shark, seeing Ernie Els, all the different, characters that were all from either Sweden or England, or there were the people who were controlling America's golf game. They were controlling their game because it was created over in London, England. But all of a sudden, this young kid from America makes it something that it makes more Americans follow golf. He changed the game, not just because he was an African American playing the game, which of course Tiger calls himself, others, but he changed the game because he was an American kicking behind and taking checks. I mean, Tiger just changed the game for American golfers as a whole. He made it fun to be an American, to see us go over, win the British Open, win the Australian Open. He just basically dominated. But no one has ever dominated in the last 20 years the way Serena has dominated. Of course, LeBron James, I think it's easy to pick LeBron James as one of the most dominating figures because when you look at him, his statue of the game. But the reason LeBron fell low on my total is only simply because he's lost more championships than he's won. And Michael Jordan speaks a lot higher. The fact, I love it when Jordan says, if you're going to compare him, 6 beats 3. 6-0 beats everything. And that's probably why I don't have LeBron as high on my list as ESPN, of course, has him on theirs. He has been a dominating figure and will continue to be a dominating figure. But is he the most dominant person on the court? When Steph Curry shoots, 20 for 30 from the three, he's not that dominant because they blow the Cavaliers off the floor. And yes, Steph has more people around him, but I mean, the shooting ability of Durant and Stephen Curry that takes away from LeBron's dominance in shooting. LeBron's ability to take the ball to the rack. He's more dominating than anybody in the NBA. But when you start talking about NBA, there's one thing that can shut down a dominant player, and that's a player who's got great accuracy, and that's what Durant and Curry does against the Cavaliers every year. And yes, he's been able to upset them once. And when he was with Miami, he had more skilled players with him. They were able to put 3 rings together as well. But when you look at true dominance, it's got to be somebody who really, truly changes the game. And if you look at the game of basketball right now, Steph Curry could be seen as more dominant than LeBron James, if you really think about it. I mean, the 3 ball is something special, and I don't care how big you are or how strong you are, the 3 ball can neutralize anything that LeBron James does. Because remember, for every 4 times he goes to the rack, Stephen Curry can shoot 2 threes and make up for it. So when you look at the most dominant players, truly, you got to pinpoint what makes them a dominant player and where they fall in line. And as I told you, I don't think anybody has been more dominating than Serena Williams and Michael Phelps. I mean, when you just talk about the sport itself and what they did for their sport, those two have to be ranked in the top two. And from there, you can pick them. But one of the things that I tried to take out of my mind when I was picking the most dominant was, of course, was it a team sport versus an individual sport? And when it's a team sport, it kind of takes some of the dominant elements out of it because you need a team as a whole to play well together to be as dominant as you need to be. But when you look at Mike Phelps, when you look at Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, and a lot of the individual sport people, you know, you're going to eliminate guys like Mike Trout and Barry Bonds, and definitely you're going to eliminate quarterbacks out of it. How they put Peyton Manning at number 3, I can't tell you. I really didn't have Peyton as that dominant of a player because he needs assistance to be dominant. He can throw the perfect pass, but if it's not catch, we'll never see that result at the end of the day. And what Peyton did was special. But how do I compare him to Tom Brady, which honestly, I put Tom Brady as a better quarterback than Peyton Manning because he was a better overall and all-around leader, which is necessary to being a dominant force. So that's my take on ESPN's Dominant 20. Of course, that special will be coming out sometime. I believe it's coming up this weekend. They're going to be airing that. I don't know if it's going to be listed as the 30 for 30, but they're going to be listing their Dominant 20 on ESPN. And like I said, I want to hear what yours are. Of course, if you want to shoot me an email, shoot it to glbell428@gmail.com. Of course, that's glbell428.com. Excuse me, I said .com, @gmail.com. Sorry about that, guys. I'm stumbling a little bit there. But, yeah, shoot me an email at glbell428@gmail.com. I want to see who your top 10 are. Get them read right here on the Power of Voices, the Legends Community Show, guy. We're going to jump now to, of course, NBA basketball. We talked about Tyronn Lue earlier. I want to talk about the young man coming out of Oklahoma, Trae Young. Of course, if you're not familiar with Trae Young, you didn't watch too much NC2A basketball this past year. He was the darling of the NC2A basketball. Of course, with Oklahoma getting knocked out in the first round, we don't know who he is, won't see him anymore. And as for NC2A, you won't be seeing him anymore, as today he announced that he would be going on to the NBA for going the next 3 years of basketball. And he says basically it's time to go to work. And this is a young man who led the NC2A this past year in scoring and assists, which is a hell of an accomplishment. Probably hasn't been done in almost 30 years. And Trae Young is a special talent, about 6'1.5", 6'2", has Stephen Curry range. But here's the difference in having his range and competing with his range. The one thing I didn't see from Trae Young was consistency. You don't see the hot and cold spurts like he showed in 28 games from Stephen Curry over 60 games. This kid went from shooting about 38% from the three-point range down to a low of 21% at the end. His turnover ratio was very high, sometimes 10 plus turnovers in a game. And this is just at the college level. So one of the things you got to question, is he leaving, going to pros too early? A lot of people are going to be naysayers to this, but I don't have a problem with it. You know, I never have a problem with a guy who wants to go and test his level of competition, test his level of competency against the best. And that's basically what Trae Young is doing, and he's going to get paid for it on top of it. Money that's lost by staying in college is lost money. I don't care what people say. He'll probably be somewhere between 1 and 10 picks. He will never replace those dollars getting another year of education and another year of competition at the NC2A. Once money's lost, it's lost. It can never be made up because it would be what would have been and not what could have been. I hope you understand that. He could make, get a new signing bonus, a higher signing bonus. He could get something. But the fact of the matter is, a year loss of revenue will never make up for the could have beens or the should have beens. So I'm all for Trae Young going into the NBA. It might be his time. He might need to put himself in a position where those assists are going to people who actually close out his plays. He's had a lot of great assists that didn't get closed. That happens with a lot of great college players. The people they're passing the ball to aren't able to finish. And that's why you see teams like Xavier, Virginia, Michigan State not in the Final Four. I mean, that's just they don't close out the play. And in the NBA, the level of play you're going to get there, the guys he's going to be passing the ball to, they will close out that play with a great assist and a great dunk. They'll close it out with hitting the three when they're wide open from the corner. A lot of those things didn't happen for Trae Young at Oklahoma. We wish him all the best. I think from a standpoint of decisions, a good decision on his part. Would this kid get better? Only thing I see this kid getting is a little bit bigger and being a more dominant player at the college level. But he'll put on that size, and he'll be able to carry that size over the next 60 some odd, 70 games that the NBA will be playing. So from a standpoint of him leaving early, thumbs up from me. Good luck to you. Don't wish anything but the best for you. Of course, we're going to close out the show this last few minutes talking about the NFL. We talk about it every week how the NFL never seems to end. We go from the season to the procurement of talent, to the drafting of talent, to the preparing for the season, to the season. There's a no off time for the NFL, but one of the things that's occurring right as we speak, the NFL's in, and let me kind of read this article that came out in the Washington Post. NFL Executive Vice President Troy Vincent told the Post that the league is set to change its controversial catch rule. Hallelujah. A catch is a catch. Confirmed that the reports last month on ESPN. Vincent told the Post that the competition committee will propose that the NFL eliminate the going to the ground rule. We've been going through this whole nightmare because it was a question of going to the ground. Oh, I love how they come up with these little catchy going to the ground rule. Along with that rule, slight movement in the ball, the receiver's hands negates a catch. Well, here's the thing. We talked about this pretty much after every controversial catch. The eyes don't deceive you. You know when it's a catch. And I know the ground can support or help a catch, but in the end, guys, the ground can cause you to fumble. And yes, the ground sometimes, if your hands are on the sides, will be called a non-catch. But when a guy has his hands under the ball and he goes to the ground and he's still controlling the ball after he hits the ground, it is a catch. Thank you to the National Football League for finally deciding to go back to the old rule that if the ball causes or jars it loose when it hits the ground, that's when it's not a catch. That Calvin Johnson catch where he took the ball down to the ground with one hand and he came up and the ball never moved 1 inch. That's a catch now, guys. No more questionable calls. I mean, let's face it, last year's call, who was that with? Kansas City. When the young man caught the ball and dove into the end zone, soon as he crossed the plane, that was a touchdown. And because he didn't control it all the way to the ground, he had already taken 2 steps. He had control of the ball. So now that old rule that's had people pissed off for the last 6 years, 7 years, it won't be around anymore. The competition committee now deciding to rid the NFL of that catch rule. Lastly, in the NFL, of course, a lot of moving going on right now. Talked about it just a little bit at the beginning of the show. Big swing in New York. New York moves down into the Colts' third position. And here's how that actually went. The Colts gave up their third draft pick, the number 3 position. They take the 6th pick from the Jets, and the Jets are going to also give the Colts 2 second-round draft picks, number 37 and 49 this year, plus next year's second-round draft pick. And all of this movement is for 4 individuals. The question being, which one will the Jets take now? I think most people think right now the top 3 quarterbacks are Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, and Josh Allen, with Baker Mayfield coming in a close 4th place. But here's the thing. Sitting at the 3rd position puts the Colts on the wire, because can the Colts become the next Cleveland Browns? You know, let's face it, the Browns have number 1 and the number 4 pick of the first round. And the Browns have never gotten it right. The only reason the Colts got it right with Peyton Manning is because they were in the Baltimore coach, remember? And they moved to Indianapolis, and he became an Indianapolis coach. So what could happen? You know, Sam Darnold could go to the Colts, right? I mean, they're sitting with Oliver Luck. What are they going to do? I mean, excuse me, the Jets are sitting with the 3rd position. I'm going back and forth looking at this, but the Colts are sitting at 6. They need a quarterback just as much as the Jets need a quarterback. There's no certainty right now with Oliver Luck, and they can't go into another year waiting on Luck to be good. And at the same time, they got to get a backup for him as well. So here we are sitting with Josh Rosen, Darnold, Allen, and don't forget Lamar Jackson is sitting in the wings as well, 2016 Heisman Trophy winning quarterback from Louisville. But Baker Mayfield is sitting there. You got the Jets sitting in the third position, and you got the Cleveland Browns. And if you're the Browns right now, you know 2 things have to occur right now. One is you're going to get a top quarterback, and you're going to probably, if you're smart, take Saquon Barkley, who, of course, would be the best player in the draft as he's ranked right now by most analysts. But he'll fall behind the 2 quarterbacks that will go ahead of him because the first 2 picks are definitely going to go to quarterbacks. But with the NFL sitting where it is today, the question I have to ask everybody is, who is the number 1 player that's going to be drafted? I want your pick of who Cleveland is going to pick number 1. Shoot me an email to glbell428@gmail.com. Who do you think is going to be the number 1 pick this year? Could Cleveland continue to be Cleveland and maybe select Baker Mayfield instead of Josh Rosen, who is my number 1 pick? I think of all the players that is player ready, mentally ready, and can play. This kid has an arm. He has an active arm. It might not be as strong as Josh Allen's, but it's stronger than Sam Darnold's and Baker Mayfield's, and he has all the tools. I like the way Josh Rosen played as a freshman. He's very composed his entire 3 years at UCLA. Even when he was hurt, he showed he had the arm strength to make some throws. But I see the Cleveland Browns going with Josh Rosen. Now, a lot of things are going to circle around that. Could Josh Rosen hold them hostage? That could be a question. You know, remember, I mean, it's a shame that when your family has money, you know, all of a sudden you're the rich kid and you might not have a desire to play football. Don't do that to Josh Rosen. This kid, you don't play this game just for the like of it. You play it for the love of it. And Josh Rosen has shown me that he actually loves the game of football, to go out and prepare the way he's prepared over the last 3 years at UCLA. But don't discredit this guy. Lastly, before I get out of here, I got to throw a shout out to Penny Hardaway, the new coach at the University of Memphis. Of course, y'all know last week Tubby Smith got let go. Some of it might have been around as controversial. We're growing quitters, but I'm happy with the Tim Hardaway pick at Memphis. Tim Hardaway will be able to recruit, and something that was said earlier today on a lot of the networks is that he would be able to recruit Memphis and Tennessee, but he wouldn't be able to get the national players. I don't know what the hell you guys are looking at. Penny is probably one of the most charismatic. He's an icon when you start talking about NBA basketball. Most of these kids grew up on Nike basketball, and they grew up watching Little Penny. So I don't know why you think when a 6'8" guy who's good looking, speaks well, dresses well, and now he's the coach who's going to help your kid walks through the door, it's not going to make a difference. It makes a difference. I've told people many years, it's not always the message, but sometimes it is the messenger. And I see Penny being a big force for the University of Memphis. Well, guys, we're going to be calling it a day. I thank you for joining me here on The Power of Voices. Of course, I'm your host, Greg Bell, and you've been listening to the Legends Community Show right here on The Power of Voices. Y'all take care.